At the end of 2375, the United Federation of Planets rose as the dominant power in the Alpha and Beta quadrants. The wartime economy of Starfleet saw the creation of the Sovereign, Acura, Defiant, Prometheus, and other classes that would now be ready to defend against any new threats, foreign or domestic. The Romulans, Klingons, Cardassians, Dominion, and any other major power that had once threatened Starfleet security had either been annihilated after the Dominion War or stuck on the other side of the wormhole. Most Alpha and Beta Quadrant powers would have to rebuild in hopes of even getting any kind of parity with Starfleet. The war was the best thing that could have happened to the Federation, but the question really is, was the Dominion War caused by some truly malevolent force that wanted to bring their order to the galaxy, or had everything from 2370 to the end of that war all been planned by some shadow broker? A shadow broker that wanted the Federation to win. First, let's break down some surprising coincidences that all ended in the Federation's favor. After the signing of the Khitomer Accords, peace reigned throughout the Alpha and Beta quadrants. While there would be the odd situation here and there, minor scale and regional wars ever so often, a golden age of the Federation was being felt. However, peace times that involve flowers will often make those of a military mindset uneasy. They believe that it will lead to weak men and that they won't be able to defend against the coming threats. Rumors of the Romulans taking a more active role in the galactic affairs and enemies that the Federation had never seen were always on the horizon. A rush to bring members into the fold of the Federation would begin, and then something else happened. With the Federation lacking the technology and soldiers to defend themselves, is it any surprise that an event so large that the entirety of the Federation would not only accept a remilitarization, but demand it?
Fight does not go well, Enterprise. We're attempting to withdraw and regroup. Rendezvous with fleet.
On Stardate 2367, it was reported that a large cybernetic aggressive force had destroyed an entire fleet at Wolf 359. All civilians on Earth were ordered to hide due to a martial law order that had been given. Amazingly, during that battle, 11,000 people, men, women, and children would be murdered by this malicious force. However, it is somewhat weird that civilians were kept on the ships that were sent to fight. They were never dropped off or even put into escape pods and told to go for the nearest base. Indeed, the very ships they were in were decades to centuries old. The strongest vessels, namely the Galaxy class, weren't even at Wolf 359. In fact, while the Enterprise D had several standoffs with the Borg Cube, it was never destroyed. Is it also any surprise that the person who was in charge of the cube at the Wolf 359 massacre was also the captain of the Federation flagship, the previously mentioned Galaxy class, that would use a sleep command to defeat the Borg? The Borg who made it all the way to Earth and were somehow defeated right then. Why would Starfleet send ships with some families to fight the Borg anyway? None of it makes sense. Speaking of families, the Cardassian border wars were a fairly gruesome event, mainly due to Starfleet being required not to fight with its full force. The Federation would sign a one-sided deal giving dozens of planets to the Cardassians. This left Federation citizens on the Cardassian border. These people would become malcontent, and many would form a terrorist organization that, while the Federation claimed to do something about it, ultimately would destabilize the Cardassian government. In fact, the Maquis would assist in the near annihilation of the Cardassians during the Klingon-Cardassian War. This all leading up to the Maquis' very destruction, but it's kind of odd. The Maquis had Starfleet weaponry and ultimately went unchecked, regardless of what authorities will tell you, and their annihilation was quick and thorough. Was this due to the Dominion's efficiency, or is there something more? While the Cardassian border wars was detrimental to the Starfleet security complex's goal of militarization, after all the Cardassians weren't hard to beat, and Wolf 359 really scared people, it didn't really empower Starfleet as much as was needed. At this point, they would be able to make ships of war, the Acura class, Defiant, and others, but they would still be restricted. However, another player would help out. The Dominion would provide the perfect excuse. The hostile government was becoming more and more of a threat. When first meeting the Dominion, Starfleet technology was unable to even come close to countering it. And during all of this, the Borg would attack, again, at Sector 001 for seemingly no reason.
All units, open fire. Remodulate shield protection. They've broken through the defense perimeter. to order. Pursuit course. Cube is changing course. 0, 2, 1, mark.
According to the official story, the cube was highly damaged upon arriving to the Sol system and would travel back in time as a last-ditch effort to supposedly stop first contact. The Enterprise E would destroy the sphere, stop the Borg, and return back. Though, surprisingly, after this, Starfleet technology suddenly leapfrogged Dominion tech. All of a sudden, Starfleet had an advantage in some situations, or it was an even fight in others. And Federation citizens were fine with it. But let's go back. Right before these events, two ships went missing, the USS Equinox and the USS Voyager. While many officers would refer to the Voyager as a warship, the official designation was that both the Equinox and the Voyager were science ships. Curiously, Voyager had been ordered from Earth all the way to Bajor and the Badlands. They were sent on a mission to take care of the Maquis. Now this seems odd since the USS Defiant was not only stationed at DS9, which is much closer, but could handle the mission. Additionally, Voyager wasn't even ready for the trip. And then, all of a sudden, both Voyager and the Maquis would go missing. And not only would Starfleet lose all of its assets, but several Cardassian ships would be destroyed in the process. And then, in a few years, Voyager would return with Borg technology that enhanced an already dominant Starfleet. Though, unfortunately, this would be after the Dominion War. On that topic, the Dominion War was one of the most terrifying times for not only the Federation, but the Alpha and Beta Quadrants. Seemingly, the Federation and Klingons were outmatched against an evil entity, and even after the Romulans joined, a victory was barely achieved. But, as has been stated, Starfleet amazingly is able to advance its tech well beyond what it had before. It's also surprising to look at the numbers when it comes to those who died. Official records show that the casualties would be in the hundreds of thousands for the Federation Alliance, with the Dominion losing hundreds of millions. Though, looking at the galaxy overall and the numbers of people on planets, that's low on both sides. It is absolutely amazing all of the individual events that occur with Starfleet coming out on top. Statistically, the coincidences of everything being an advantage for the Federation is astronomical. The citizens of the United Federation of Planets are lucky that everything works out the way that it does. Or are they? Is it possible, if not probable, all of these things are connected? That they were orchestrated?
All right, let's do this one last time.
Hey guys, I need your help. As you know, taking time to research these topics, record, edit the videos, find the footage, and much more is a larger task than you might realize. YouTube doesn't exactly make it easy for entertainers to keep making the content you love. Keeping food on the table is a pretty important thing to me. So if you like what you're watching now and you want to help out, please consider hitting that join button right below this video to become a YouTube member, or going to patreon.com/Lore Reloaded and becoming a patron there. I've started releasing merchandise that will hopefully go to both members and patrons, so definitely check it out. Again, if just 1/3 of the people who watch these videos gave me $1, I'd never have to worry about YouTube advertising again. Patreon.com/Lore Reloaded or the join button below. Thanks for the consideration. What if all of these events are ultimately tied to one species and one specific war? Just one. What if everything is because of Species 8472? Let's analyze that more. Is it possible that the Borg Collective had been looking for an alliance to help them defeat what would be one of their greatest nemesis? Is it possible in 2354 the Borg became aware of Species 8472, that they had begun studying the creatures and their civilization and recognized the threat that was posed to the entire universe? According to Admiral Janeway, Species 8472 wanted to destroy everything, make it burn. The Borg, realizing that they did not have the capabilities to fight the malevolent universe destroyers alone, began searching for the right military. Someone that would stand with them. There were quote-unquote scientists that had heard rumblings of the cybernetic organizations and had went out to find them. However, this doesn't make a lot of sense, as search for cybernetic beings seemed insane. They were outcasts in the scientist community, so what if they weren't scientists at all? Perhaps the Hansons were actually Starfleet diplomats, which would explain why they went missing. And with the Hansons' help, the Borg would determine that Starfleet was their best chance. In fact, in 2365, it could be that the Borg Queen made contact with Starfleet officially and a deal was struck. Starfleet would assist the Borg in exchange for advancements in technology, as well as a promise to assist them in empowering the Federation to effectively control the Alpha and Beta quadrants. Unfortunately, Starfleet security realized that their technology was not advanced enough yet to help, and this was going to also be a PR game, not just a military one. In order to trick the populace, a plan was devised where a Borg cube would be sent into Federation space and it made to look like an attack. 40 ships would respond, and all but one would be destroyed. The Enterprise would then miraculously find a way to stop them after recovering Picard, but did any of that really happen? With martial law in effect, only military personnel were present. Military personnel that would suddenly be killed, leave Starfleet in shame, or given posts far away from the seat of power in only a few short years. No other third party was present on that fateful day. The Wolf 359 false flag incident empowered Starfleet to begin making weapons that could be used to fight a war, but the Federation still had enemies, the most hostile of which was currently the Cardassians. While the Cardassians weren't a huge threat, they would bleed resources, so no one was surprised that suddenly negotiators would agree to allow colonies to be given to the Cardassians. And then after this, suddenly a subsection of the populace started to fight back. These Federation citizens would be well armed and carry Starfleet weaponry. Hell, Starfleet officers would amazingly betray the Federation and join the Maquis front. These actions destabilized the Cardassians and caused them to focus on only a single side of their border, possibly even forcing them to surrender Bajor. Starfleet promised to deal with the problem that were the Maquis, but never did anything. What if they didn't do anything because all of these civilians were Section 31 operatives? It would make sense that Section 31 would work to keep the Cardassian military busy. They would also be able to work outside the bounds of Starfleet policy while manipulating events not only for the Cardassians, but other entities. During all of this, though, there would be a wrinkle for the Borg Federation alliance. Starfleet technology, even with the advancements after Wolf 359, would not be powerful enough. Starfleet couldn't hope to defeat the Dominion, let alone Species 8472, at this time. So, another false flag attack was planned. The Battle of Sector 001 would be very, very different. The new vessels of Starfleet appeared able to cause substantial damage to the Borg cube, with new weapons and advanced tactics, but even with all of these advantages, the Borg, according to the Enterprise E crew, traveled back in time to stop First Contact and prevent the creation of the Federation. But if this was the case, why would they use time travel after a failed invasion of Earth? Why would they not do the time travel somewhere else that Starfleet couldn't get to them? In fact, why not use time travel to take over all of the galaxy? It makes no sense. Unless that was never their goal. In reality, the Borg would travel back in time to give technology to a younger Earth to ensure that Starfleet and Section 31 would be able to fight with them. This lines up right with secret documents that had recently linked the United Earth Starfleet to discovering Borg technology, and yet, it's never mentioned after that time again. Given how manipulations of the timelines occur, who's to say that the Battle of Sector 001 didn't happen multiple times, as more and more technologies is shared? In fact, what if the Battle of Sector 001 continues to go on to this day as the Borg allow more and more technology to fall into Federation hands? And is it any wonder that the crew of the Enterprise E are the exact same people that were on the Enterprise D at Wolf 359? Of course, if there is one constant in the universe, it would be that the Federation species aren't stupid. All of these coincidences would slowly begin to build up. The populace was starting to understand what was occurring. The shadow brokers of the Federation needed a patsy, and they would find that in Admiral Leyton. The Leyton Coup was an attempt by a rogue admiral to create a military authoritarian government. Unfortunately for Leyton, the coup was sloppy, and the failure of the admiral was all but assured before it even began. This patsy would be exposed, and the populace quelled as any thoughts of powerful shadow brokers connecting events would be forgotten. This was a masterful move as the final pieces, the final moves, were set into motion. In 2373, Voyager, along with the Maquis complement, were quote-unquote lost in the Badlands. We've already discussed how this makes very little sense. Voyager was stationed at Earth, wasn't ready, had to travel across the entirety of the Federation to get to Deep Space Nine. And their orders were to capture the Maquis, but the USS Defiant could have done that already. So that wasn't the plan all along. Voyager was in fact not hunting Maquis, but linking up with them. The captain of the Intrepid-class vessel would meet up with the operatives disguised as Maquis and utilize Borg technology so that they would suddenly appear in the Delta Quadrant. The caretakers never existed. I mean, what are the chances that a ship specifically designed for deep space travel, unlike the Defiant, would be ordered all the way on the other side of the quadrant and then go to the exact place that some caretaker would be capturing ships at? And then, all of a sudden, they would get to the Borg at the exact time the Borg needed them to defeat Species 8472. It makes more sense that Voyager would suddenly appear using travel technology from the Borg, link up with the Equinox that had already been studying Species 8472. The Equinox scuttled for parts, and then a war against 8472 commences with Starfleet help defeating them. But what about Starfleet? What do they get out of all of this? Well, is it any surprise that after Voyager goes missing, Starfleet is all of a sudden able to defeat the Borg? Starfleet ships are suddenly upgraded. In fact, we hear a Vorta clearly surprised by this. Starfleet would ultimately dominate the Dominion, defeating them. And as a result of the Dominion War, the Romulans, Cardassians, Klingons, Dominion Breen, and other powers are severely weakened, while the Federation was seemingly strengthened. The Dominion would be forced into the Gamma Quadrant, and the Borg, supposedly, had been destroyed by Janeway. Starfleet would be dominant, the Borg would be gone, 8472 defeated, and Starfleet would now own the Alpha and Beta Quadrant. Everyone would want to be a part of the United Federation of Planets. All of these events fit perfectly together when you take a close look at them. Or maybe it's as the official story goes. Everything that happened, one after the other, with Starfleet always being on top and no conspiracy, just occurred. Aren't we all lucky to be a part of the United Federation of Planets?